The rain outside the studio window sounded calm, but inside the walls of the set, something felt heavy. Keanu Reeves walked slowly across the empty soundstage, his steps soft but uncertain. It had been weeks since filming began on the new emotional drama, and though everyone admired his quiet focus, there was something different this time. The light in his eyes that once brought calm to the whole crew seemed dim. Sandra Bullock, his longtime friend and co-star, noticed it first. The crew respected his silence. No one dared to ask questions because everyone knew Keanu was private about his feelings. Yet the unspoken truth lingered around him like a faint shadow. He would smile politely, help the young staff carry props, even thank the catering team. But behind those gestures, his heart carried a quiet ache. Something inside him had changed. During one of the lunch breaks, Sandra watched him from a distance. He sat near the corner table, sipping coffee that had already gone cold. He wasn't scrolling his phone or reading a script. He was just staring ahead, as if seeing something no one else could. When the assistant director called him back to set, he nodded slowly and left his untouched cup behind. Sandra quietly followed with her eyes and whispered to herself, "He's hurting, and no one even knows why." That night, as the crew packed up, Sandra walked past his dressing room. The door was slightly open, and the faint glow of a desk lamp spilled onto the hallway floor. Inside, she saw Keanu sitting on the couch, holding a small framed photograph. It was an old picture, worn and faded, showing a younger man and a woman smiling near a motorbike. Sandra stepped back before he noticed her. She didn't want to intrude, but something in that quiet scene stayed in her mind long after she drove home. The next morning, the filming schedule was tight. Keanu arrived early, as always, helping the lighting crew adjust the setup even though it wasn't his job. Sandra approached him gently and handed him a paper cup of black coffee. He looked up with a faint smile, the kind that hides more than it shows. "You never change," she said softly. "Still helping everyone before helping yourself." He gave a small shrug. "It keeps me busy." She paused for a moment, watching the way he avoided her gaze. "Busy isn't always the same as okay." He looked down at the floor and said quietly, "Some things you just carry, even when they get heavy." Those words echoed in her mind all day. On camera, Keanu delivered his lines perfectly, his eyes filled with real emotion that made the entire crew fall silent. Off camera, he went back to stillness, his laughter missing. Sandra could feel the difference between acting and truth. She had seen Keanu play broken men before, but this was not acting. This was something real. Late that evening, the director asked them to stay for one more emotional scene. The script required Keanu's character to say goodbye to someone he loved. As the camera rolled, his expression turned heartbreakingly raw. Sandra, playing opposite him, felt tears rising even before her cue. When the director yelled cut, the whole set stayed quiet. It was not the performance that silenced them. It was the feeling that he wasn't pretending. After everyone left, Sandra returned to the stage. The lights were dim, and only Keanu remained, sitting on the same bench used in the scene. She approached carefully, her voice calm. "Keanu, that was more than acting." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked toward the empty seats where the crew had been. "Sometimes pain finds its own way into art," he said softly. "And maybe that's the only place it belongs." She wanted to say something comforting, but her words felt too small. She knew that kindness needed to come in silence first, so she sat beside him quietly. The two of them remained there, listening to the faint hum of the studio lights. After a long moment, he whispered, "You ever feel like you're doing everything right but still feel lost?" "All the time," she replied, her tone filled with quiet honesty. He looked at her for the first time in days. "How do you fix that?" She smiled gently. "You don't fix it. You just remind yourself that you're not alone." He didn't respond, but for the first time, a small spark of relief crossed his face. She saw it, the beginning of something changing inside him. It wasn't joy yet, but it was softer than the sadness she had seen before. The next morning, Sandra decided to do something different. She bought 2 cups of coffee from a small cafe near the studio and wrote a small note on his cup. "For the strongest soul I know." She placed it on his chair before he arrived. When Keanu found it, he looked around quietly, smiling just a little. He didn't say anything, but when Sandra walked in, he nodded in silent thanks. Something about that gesture felt heavier than words. That day, the mood on set was lighter. He even cracked a quiet joke during lunch, making a few crew members laugh for the first time in weeks. Sandra watched him, relieved. She didn't know what he had gone through, but she knew small kindness could reach where words could not. Yet she also sensed that the storm inside him was not gone. It was just hiding for now. Later that night, as the rain returned and the studio lights faded, Keanu stayed behind again. Sandra, leaving later than usual, saw him sitting near the prop room, holding something small in his hand. She walked closer and saw it was a folded letter. Before she could ask, he stood up and tucked it away into his jacket pocket. He smiled politely and said, "Good night, Sandra." His tone was calm, but his eyes carried the same quiet pain. She nodded back, saying softly, "Good night, Keanu." "Take care of yourself," he replied. "I'll try." As she walked to her car, she looked back once more. Through the window, she could still see him standing alone under the dim light, lost in thought. She didn't know it yet, but that night was only the beginning of a journey that would test both their hearts. A journey where one gentle gesture would heal something words never could. The next day, everything would start to change. The next morning began with soft sunlight breaking through the gray clouds. The studio felt lighter than usual, but Keanu's silence still lingered like a quiet echo. Everyone respected his space, yet Sandra couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper rested beneath that calm surface. She had worked with him for years and knew the difference between peace and pain pretending to be peace. During the first few takes, Keanu performed flawlessly, but between scenes, he kept glancing at his phone. His expression would shift from focused to distant, almost as if he was waiting for something that would never come. When the assistant called for a short break, he slipped away quietly to the back corridor near the storage rooms where no one usually went. Sandra, carrying 2 cups of coffee, noticed his absence and followed. She found him sitting on a wooden crate staring at a folded piece of paper. He didn't notice her at first. The light from a nearby window cast a gentle shadow over his face. For a second, she saw the man behind the fame, the same person who carried loss with quiet grace. She softly cleared her throat. "I brought your favorite." "No sugar, just warmth." Keanu looked up slowly, his eyes a little tired but grateful. "You remembered?" "I always remember the small things," she replied with a small smile. He accepted the cup, holding it with both hands as if it were something fragile. For a while, they both said nothing. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was honest. Finally, Sandra spoke, her voice calm and gentle. "You know, the crew really looks up to you. You make everyone feel safe here." Keanu smiled faintly. "I'm not sure I deserve that. I'm just trying to get through the days." "We all are," she said softly. "But you don't have to do it alone." He looked at her then, his eyes reflecting a mix of pain and gratitude. "You're kind, Sandra. Maybe too kind." "There's no such thing," she replied. "Sometimes kindness is the only bridge left when everything else breaks." He didn't respond, but his gaze softened. She could feel him letting his guard down, even if only a little. Later that afternoon, filming moved to a darker emotional scene. Keanu's character had to deliver a monologue about losing hope, but finding strength through others. When the director called action, something changed in the air. His voice trembled, not because of the script, but because it was real. His words carried the weight of a man speaking from experience. Every person on set felt it. Some even wiped away tears. When the director yelled cut, the studio stayed quiet. No one clapped. No one spoke. Sandra approached him slowly and whispered, "That didn't come from the script, did it?" He shook his head, his eyes glistening. "No, that came from somewhere I thought I'd buried." "Then maybe it was time to let it breathe again," she said gently. After that scene, Keanu walked outside for some air. Sandra followed a few minutes later, finding him near the old oak tree behind the studio. He was staring at the horizon, hands tucked into his jacket. "You know," she began softly, "every time you open up like that, you remind people that it's okay to feel broken." He sighed quietly. Broken doesn't fit well with how people see me. They expect calm, strength, control. And what do you expect from yourself? She asked. He paused, thinking. I expect to keep standing even when it hurts. She nodded. That's not weakness, Keanu. That's what makes people strong. Not hiding pain, but standing with it. They stood there quietly for a long while, the wind brushing against their jackets. It was one of those rare silences that didn't need words. That evening, when Sandra returned to her car, she found an envelope placed on her windshield. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper with neat handwriting. It read, "Thank you for reminding me that kindness still speaks louder than pain." It wasn't signed, but she knew exactly who it was from. The next day, Sandra noticed something different. Keanu greeted everyone with more warmth. He laughed softly when a camera assistant tripped over a cable, helping him up with genuine concern. Even the director commented on how his energy felt lighter. The darkness hadn't disappeared, but something gentle had entered its place. During lunch, Sandra sat with him under a nearby canopy. The rain had returned, soft and rhythmic. She asked quietly, "That letter you were holding yesterday, does it still hurt to read it?" He nodded. "Yes, but not as much as before. Pain changes when someone sits beside it." "Good," she said with a small smile. "Then let it sit with you. Don't lock it away again." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Why do you care so much?" "Because," she said simply, "I know what it's like to hide behind strength. And I know that sometimes one gentle gesture can bring someone back to smiles." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, he seemed to truly hear them. Then he smiled softly and said, "Maybe it's working." That night, when everyone had left, Keanu stayed back once again. He walked to his trailer and noticed something resting on his table, a small wooden box with no note. It was polished and old, like something passed down through time. Curious, he opened it carefully. Inside lay a folded piece of paper with a hand-drawn sketch of two hands holding a candle, and beneath it, a small silver key tied with a red ribbon. The note read only 6 words, "For when the lights go out." His heart pounded as he stared at the drawing. It felt personal, yet mysterious. There was no name, no clue about who left it. He looked around, but the hallway was empty. For the first time in a long while, he felt both confusion and hope at once. He placed the box back on the table and sat quietly for a while. He thought about Sandra, about her kindness, and about the strange timing of the gift. Something told him this was only the beginning of something meaningful, something that would soon reveal more than he was ready for. Outside, the rain stopped and the lights inside the studio flickered once before fading completely. The world went dark, leaving only the glow from that small wooden box. Keanu didn't know it yet, but the message was real, and soon he would learn what it truly meant to find light again. The following morning, the studio buzzed with quiet excitement. Rumors spread quickly among the crew that Keanu had received a mysterious gift the night before. No one knew where it came from, but everyone could feel that something strange yet beautiful was unfolding. Keanu himself arrived earlier than usual, carrying the small wooden box carefully in his hand. His face was calm, but his eyes were filled with thought. He placed the box on the makeup table and stared at it for a long time. The silver key shimmered softly in the light. The drawing of two hands holding a candle seemed almost alive, as if it had been waiting for him to notice something hidden within. He traced the lines of the drawing with his fingertips, whispering to himself, "For when the lights go out." "But why me?" Sandra entered quietly, holding her usual 2 cups of coffee. She noticed the box immediately. "That looks old," she said softly, placing a cup beside him. "Where did it come from?" Keanu shook his head slowly. "I don't know. I found it on my table last night." "Maybe a fan?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Fans don't usually leave keys and candle drawings." Sandra leaned closer, studying the sketch. "It looks handmade. Whoever drew this cared deeply. The candle in the middle, it feels symbolic. Maybe it means hope. Or memory," Keanu said quietly. "Light always means memory to me." The room fell silent for a moment. Sandra could sense his mind drifting somewhere far away. She decided not to ask yet. Instead, she touched his arm gently and said, "Whatever it means, maybe it found the right person." The day's filming began, but Keanu's focus kept returning to the wooden box. During a scene break, he noticed the prop master, an older man named Leo, watching him thoughtfully. Leo had worked in studios for decades and knew every detail of the place. Keanu approached him and showed him the key. "Ever seen something like this before?" Leo squinted, adjusting his glasses. Looks like an old studio locker key. We used to have wooden lockers before everything turned digital." "Where are they now?" Keanu asked. Leo smiled faintly. "Down in the storage wing. No one uses that section anymore. Half the lights don't even work." Keanu felt a strange pull. Maybe this was connected to the message on the note. "For when the lights go out." He pocketed the key and decided he would check the old wing later that night. During lunch, Sandra joined him on the outdoor bench under the shade of a large tree. "You've been quiet today," she said. "More than usual." He looked at her with a half smile. "I'm thinking about that box." "You think someone's trying to tell you something?" "I think someone already did," he said softly. Her eyes softened. "Whatever it is, I'm sure it's something good. Maybe a thank you? A thank you from who?" "From life," she replied simply. "Sometimes it sends reminders in strange packages." He chuckled lightly. "That sounds like something only you would say." "Then maybe you should listen," she teased gently. As night fell, the studio emptied out. The corridors grew still, and the hum of distant generators echoed faintly. Keanu took the wooden box and the key with him, his footsteps echoing softly on the concrete floor. He followed the narrow hallway leading to the abandoned storage wing. The lights flickered weakly as he entered. The air smelled of dust and memories. Rows of old lockers lined the walls, metal ones on the left, wooden ones on the right. Their numbers were faded and uneven. He moved slowly, scanning each lock until one caught his attention. It had a small carved mark, a candle etched into the wood. His heart skipped. He placed the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. He turned it slowly, and the locker creaked open. Inside was a single envelope, aged and yellow around the edges. He opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note, "To the man who taught me kindness when no one else did." Beneath it was a folded photograph of a young man in a studio uniform standing beside Keanu, smiling brightly. Keanu froze. He remembered the face instantly. It was the lighting assistant who had once worked with him years ago. A kind young man named Ben who had always carried a small flashlight around his neck. Keanu had defended him once when he was nearly fired for breaking an expensive light fixture. Keanu had quietly paid for the damage and told no one. He read the rest of the note. "You once said light belongs to everyone. I believed that. When I lost my job, your words stayed with me. I became a teacher. I taught others how to find their own light. If you ever read this, know that your kindness never stopped glowing. This locker is now yours. Thank you." His eyes filled with emotion. He stepped back and leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath. Years of silence suddenly felt lighter. The darkness in his heart seemed to flicker with a soft spark again. He didn't notice Sandra standing at the end of the hallway. She had come back after forgetting her scarf and followed the faint light from his phone. She stopped when she saw him holding the letter, tears quietly falling down his face. She didn't interrupt. She just watched him, knowing that this moment wasn't meant to be shared with words. After a few minutes, Keanu turned and saw her. Their eyes met, and in that instant, no explanation was needed. She smiled softly and said, "You found it, didn't you?" He nodded, his voice breaking slightly. "I think I found more than that." They walked out together under the dim lights of the corridor. The air outside was cool and calm. Sandra looked at him and asked gently, "Who was it from?" He told her about Ben, about the kindness he had forgotten, and how the note reminded him that goodness never disappears. It only travels through time. She listened quietly and said, "Maybe that's why you got the box. Maybe someone wanted you to remember your own light." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that someone was you." She shook her head. "No, Keanu. Not this time. But I think whoever left it knew you needed it now." As they reached the parking lot, the rain began again, soft and peaceful. Keanu looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you." Sandra didn't ask who he was thanking. She didn't need to. Inside the locker, unnoticed by both of them, one more small envelope remained hidden behind a loose panel. It carried a name written in faded ink, Sandra. It would be weeks before anyone found it. And when they did, the truth behind it would change everything they thought they knew. The next morning, the studio felt alive again. Keanu arrived early, his steps lighter than before. Something had changed in him. The quiet sadness that once followed him now carried a soft calm, as if a hidden door had opened inside his heart. He greeted the crew warmly, helped the camera team set up lights, and even laughed when someone accidentally dropped a prop. Everyone noticed, but no one questioned it. Only Sandra knew that something beautiful had shifted within him. During lunch, Sandra found him sitting under the same old oak tree behind the studio. The air was cool, and the sunlight danced through the branches. He looked up at her with a smile that felt genuine this time. "You seem different today," she said. "I am," he replied softly. "Last night reminded me that kindness never really fades. It just waits until you're ready to see it again." She sat down beside him. "So what did you do with the letter?" "I kept it," he said. "It's not just a memory. It's a reminder." They sat quietly for a while, watching the leaves fall. The peace between them felt natural, like two old souls finding balance. But even as calm surrounded them, a faint curiosity still stirred in Sandra's heart. She kept thinking about the box, the candle drawing, and the silver key. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than what Keanu had found. That evening, filming continued late into the night. A storm brewed outside and thunder rolled across the sky. During the final scene, a sudden power surge hit the building and the lights went out completely. The crew gasped as darkness filled the studio. For a moment, everyone stood frozen, unsure of what to do. In the darkness, Keanu remembered the note. "For when the lights go out." He reached into his jacket pocket and felt the key still there. His heart pounded as he pulled out his phone flashlight and guided himself toward the old hallway. Sandra followed close behind, her instincts telling her that this wasn't a coincidence. The corridor was pitch black except for the small circle of light from his phone. They reached the row of lockers again. When he opened the one with the candle mark, the faint smell of dust and wood filled the air. Something inside glimmered faintly, letters stacked neatly, each sealed with wax. Sandra held her breath as Keanu lifted the top one. It was addressed simply to the man who kept the lights on. He opened it slowly and read out loud. "If you're reading this, it means my mother found you. She promised she would. I wanted to thank you again for what you did years ago. You probably don't remember, but that day you defended me. You changed my life. When I started teaching, I told every student that light doesn't come from bulbs or cameras. It comes from people like you. If this letter ever finds you, know that you've been a light even in rooms you never entered." As he read the final line, his voice trembled. Sandra could see the tears forming in his eyes. She stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "That's beautiful," she whispered. He nodded, his voice low. "I never knew he felt that way. I just did what felt right at the time." "That's what real kindness is," she said softly. "It doesn't wait to be seen." When the emergency lights finally came on, the crew rushed to fix the equipment. But Keanu and Sandra stayed in that quiet corner, surrounded by the past. The locker, once forgotten, had become a time capsule of gratitude. Sandra helped him gather the letters and place them carefully back inside. When she turned to close the locker, something caught her attention. A second key taped to the inside wall, smaller than the first. Attached to it was a note with a single word: smile. She looked at Keanu with curiosity. "Do you think it's for another locker?" "Only one way to find out," he said. They searched the hallway until they found a smaller wooden compartment near the end, half hidden behind old props. Keanu inserted the new key and the door creaked open. Inside was a small photo frame wrapped in cloth. When he removed the cover, his breath caught. It was a picture of him, Sandra, and Ben taken during their first project together years ago. They had no idea the photo even existed. Behind the frame was another note in the same handwriting. "You both taught me that light is not something you see. It's something you give." Sandra pressed her hand to her mouth, her eyes glistening. How could he have kept this? Maybe he knew we'd need it someday, Keanu whispered. The storm outside grew stronger, the rain hammering against the roof. Thunder echoed, yet in that small room there was warmth. Sandra looked at Keanu, her expression soft. You see, even when you thought you were lost, someone somewhere was carrying your kindness forward. He turned to her with a quiet smile. And someone here reminded me to look for it again. For a moment, they stood there, surrounded by silence, both realizing how deeply connected they had become, not through fame or work, but through simple acts of understanding. Before leaving, Sandra noticed something else inside the compartment, a small candle identical to the one drawn on the note. She picked it up and smiled. Should we light it? Keanu nodded. Yes, let's give the light back. She lit the candle, and a soft golden glow filled the hallway. They watched the flame flicker, steady and calm. In that fragile light, Keanu felt something shift inside him. The grief that had once darkened his days began to soften. You know, he said quietly, I thought I'd forgotten how to smile for real. Then let this light remind you, Sandra replied. Sometimes gentle things heal the deepest wounds. As they walked back toward the main set, the candlelight glowed behind them, flickering softly like a heartbeat. The power returned soon after, but that one small flame stayed in Keanu's memory long after the storm passed. Later that night, when he returned to his trailer, he found another envelope slipped under his door. His name was written in the same handwriting as before. Inside was a short message. Thank you for finding the light. The next smile will not be yours, it will be hers. He froze as he read it again. The words carried mystery, and one question echoed in his mind. Who is hers? He didn't realize that the answer would come soon, and when it did, it would change everything he thought he knew about the letters, the locker, and even the gentle gesture that had saved his heart. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the city washed and quiet. Sunlight streamed across the studio lot, but for Keanu, everything felt strangely heavier. The note he had found under his trailer door haunted him all night. The next smile will not be yours, it will be hers. The words echoed in his head, soft yet unsettling. Who had written them? And what did they mean? When he arrived on set, Sandra greeted him with her usual warm smile, but she quickly noticed the distant look in his eyes. Rough night? She asked gently. He nodded. Found another letter. It said something about her. Her who? That's the thing, he said softly. I don't know. She frowned slightly, sensing his unease. Maybe it's connected to the others. Maybe there's still something left to find. Filming began, but Keanu's thoughts drifted constantly. During a short break, Sandra approached him and handed him a folded newspaper clipping. I found this while looking through old studio archives, she said. Look at the date. The clipping showed a small article about a tragic car accident from years ago. The headline read, Studio Assistant Remembered for His Kindness and Light. Beneath it was a picture of Ben, the same young man whose letters they had discovered. Sandra's voice softened as she pointed to the last line of the article. It says his mother used to visit the studio every year to leave flowers in his memory. Keanu looked up slowly. So she's still alive? It seems so, Sandra replied. And maybe she's the one who left you those gifts. His heart tightened. But how would she know me? How would she find my trailer? Maybe someone helped her, Sandra said quietly. Someone who knew your schedule. Keanu paused, deep in thought. Then he whispered, Someone like you. She looked at him, startled. What are you saying? You were there every time something happened, Sandra. The box, the candle, the letters. You were there. Her eyes widened in shock, then softened with emotion. Keanu, I swear I didn't write those notes. But, she hesitated, I did meet her. He froze. You met Ben's mother? She nodded slowly. 2 weeks before we started this film, I was at a charity event. An elderly woman approached me with a small wooden box. She said it belonged to someone who once gave her son hope. I didn't know who she meant until she showed me the photograph, the one of you, Ben, and me. Keanu's heart pounded. You never told me. I didn't know how, she said, her voice trembling. She asked me to give you the box when the time felt right. I waited because You looked lost. I thought maybe the right time was when you needed light the most. He stared at her, stunned into silence. Everything suddenly made sense. The box, the key, the candle drawing, even the words on the note. It had all begun with her gentle decision to help. After a long pause, he asked softly, "Why didn't you tell me before?" She looked down, tears glimmering in her eyes. Because sometimes kindness works best when it doesn't wear a name. For a while, neither of them spoke. Keanu's chest felt heavy, not with anger, but with gratitude so deep it hurt. "You did all this," he whispered. "You helped me find him again." "And you helped me find myself." She shook her head gently. "No, Keanu. I only helped deliver what was already meant for you." Just then, the assistant director rushed in, holding something in his hand. "Someone left this for you again," he said, passing Keanu a small envelope. It was sealed with red wax, the same mark as the previous letters. Keanu opened it carefully. Inside was another note in the same familiar handwriting. "Thank you for helping my son live again through your memories. But there's one more light left to honor. She was the one who carried the candle when you couldn't." Keanu looked at Sandra, realizing the truth. "It's you," he whispered. "You were the light she wrote about." Sandra's voice trembled. "I didn't do it for that." He smiled softly. "I know. That's what makes it real." Later that evening, the crew prepared for a quiet wrap-up dinner at the studio. Keanu stood before the team, holding the wooden box in his hands. The atmosphere was still and emotional. "This film taught me something more than acting," he said slowly. "It reminded me that kindness doesn't fade. It travels through people, through time, through small gestures. Sometimes the gentlest act can bring someone back from silence." He turned to Sandra and continued, "We all face darkness in our own ways, but someone's light always finds us. And when it does, it's not luck, it's love." The room fell completely silent. Even the director lowered his head in respect. Sandra tried to hold back her tears, but failed. She whispered, "Ben would be proud." After the dinner, as the studio lights dimmed, Sandra walked back toward her car. Keanu followed quietly, holding something behind his back. When she turned, he handed her the small candle from the locker, now placed inside a glass holder. "This belongs to you," he said softly. "The light that brought me back." She smiled gently, tears glistening in her eyes. "No, Keanu. It belongs to everyone who still believes kindness matters." He placed the candle in her hands. "Then let's keep it burning." As they stood under the night sky, the faint wind brushed through the trees. Neither of them noticed a figure watching from afar, an older woman standing by the studio gate, smiling through tears before quietly walking away. In her hand, she held a final sealed letter addressed to the two who brought light back to my world. The next morning, that letter would be found on Sandra's chair, and what it revealed inside would become the most emotional truth of all. The morning sun rose slowly over the studio, filling every corner with soft golden light. The storm had passed, but its memory still lingered in the air. When Sandra Bullock arrived on set, she noticed something resting on her chair, a sealed envelope with her name written in neat, careful handwriting. The wax seal was shaped like a tiny candle. She froze for a moment, her heart beating faster. Keanu walked in behind her, coffee in hand, and noticed the letter. "Another one?" he asked softly. She nodded. "But this one's different. It's addressed to me." The crew began setting up for the final day of filming, but the two of them stepped aside, finding a quiet spot near the same oak tree that had witnessed so many of their conversations. Sandra broke the seal and unfolded the letter. Her hands trembled slightly as she began to read aloud. "Dear Sandra, if you are reading this, then you've already helped him smile again. Years ago, when my son Ben worked with you both, he often spoke of how your kindness kept him going on the hardest days. He told me once that the two of you carried light in different ways. He said Keanu taught him strength, and you taught him gentleness." Sandra paused, her eyes misting. Keanu listened silently, every word sinking deeper into him. She continued reading. "When my son passed away, I wanted to give something back to the people who gave him hope. I kept that locker key for years, waiting for the right moment to return it. When I met you, Sandra, I saw the same compassion in your eyes that my son once described. I knew you would understand when the time came. Thank you for being brave enough to carry light for others, even when you didn't know it was your own. Please tell Keanu this. His kindness reached my son when no one else saw him, and because of him, my son became a teacher, a helper, and a better man. That is the legacy of true stars. Not the light they stand under, but the light they leave behind. The letter ended with one final line that made Sandra's voice tremble. The locker was never about memory. It was about reflection. The light that healed him now belongs to both of you. Keep it shining. When she finished reading, silence surrounded them. The wind moved gently through the branches above. Keanu's eyes glistened, and he said quietly, "She knew exactly what we both needed." Sandra nodded, holding the letter close to her chest. She wanted us to remember that kindness outlives everything else. For a long time, they sat together without speaking. The world outside felt calm, peaceful. When Keanu finally stood, he looked at the studio building and said, "Do you think Ben ever knew how far his light would travel?" "I think he knew," Sandra replied. "And I think his mother just made sure we did too." That evening, the cast and crew gathered for the final shoot. The last scene of the film took place in a softly lit room, a single candle burning at the center. The director gave a quiet nod, and the cameras began rolling. Keanu's character was supposed to say a line about finding peace. But when he looked at the candle, he paused. Instead, he said something unscripted. "Sometimes light doesn't come from the sky," he whispered. "Sometimes it comes from the hands that hold you when you can't see it." The entire set went silent. Sandra felt tears in her eyes as the camera captured the moment, raw, real, and filled with truth. When the director finally called cut, no one moved. Everyone just stood there watching the two of them, knowing they had witnessed something beyond acting. Afterward, as the crew began to pack up, Keanu walked to Sandra's side and said quietly, "That line wasn't in the script." She smiled softly. "No, but it was in your heart." He looked down for a moment, then lifted his gaze toward her. "Thank you, Sandra. Not just for the film, for everything. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself." She touched his arm gently. "You don't have to thank me. You've always carried kindness. I just helped you find where you left it." They both smiled, not the kind born from relief, but the kind that comes from understanding something greater than words. Later that night, when everyone had left, Keanu returned to the old hallway one last time. He stood before the wooden locker, the candle still resting inside its small holder. He lit it again, watching the gentle flame dance. "Thank you," he whispered. For him, for her, for the light. He placed a folded note beside the candle. It read, "For those who keep the light alive." As he turned to leave, he saw Sandra standing quietly behind him. She had come back too, carrying the framed photo of the three of them, herself, Keanu, and Ben. She placed it next to the candle and smiled. "Now it's complete," she said softly. Together, they watched as the candlelight glowed around the frame, reflecting softly off the wood. It was a perfect symbol, past and present, grief and gratitude, loss and kindness, all in one small flame. Keanu looked at her and said in a voice full of peace, "You were right. One gentle gesture can bring someone back to smiles," she replied, "and sometimes one smile can bring someone back to life." Outside, the night sky was clear, stars shining like tiny reminders of every soul who ever gave light to another. The camera crew passing by later noticed the faint glow coming from the old locker, but didn't touch it. They simply smiled and walked on, as if understanding that some stories don't end. They just keep glowing quietly in the dark, and for Keanu and Sandra, that night marked not an ending, but a beginning. A silent promise that wherever their paths led, they would carry the same candlelight forward, to remind the world that even when pain dims the heart, kindness always finds a way to bring it back to smiles.